They're schemers. Schemers trying to control their little worlds. I'm not a schemer. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. And here we go.
Well, hello there. You beautiful, beautiful, amazing, wonderful people. I hope you are all well on this wicked, wonderful midweek hump. That's it, baby. It's a midweek hump. I knew that I would have to at least acknowledge the fact that this is hump day. Look, we all love a midweek hump. And then I have to quickly check just to make sure I've got it right. But yes, it is indeed the midweek hump. You're looking absolutely amazing. I'm going to get straight into the meat and potatoes. But before I go ahead, if you've not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, multiple videos, and we will be covering more than just the Idaho 4 case. I do promise you, when there are things that we do not have to cover, we will migrate into other things. I will later on be sharing a story from inside the UK where a young girl, you'll have to, check it out. Like I say, subscribe to the channel, like and all that jazz, but check the beauty of living in the UK, and let's just hope I don't get arrested and locked up for telling you about it, because that's a thing as well. But anyway, in this video, I'm heading over to Docket Decoder, because a few of you reached out to me in the night, and you said, look, you need to go and check this out. You need to watch it. Now, Docket Decoder is someone who has got content on the Idaho 4. They're following it very, very intently, and they're bringing information that I feel is important. And I know that some people are struggling with this Idaho 4 situation because their mentality is, look, Brian Kohberger admitted it, and you crazy motherfuckers, you're like, oh, you still can't let it go. You still can't let it go. Look, all we want as a, how can I say, as a group of people, which is quite a large group of people, is when you are talking about removing someone's freedom for the rest of their life or executing them, we believe that there is a system that should be a functioning system to prove to the public that the punishment is warranted. And what the Idaho 4 case has consistently done, in my opinion, is failed to show the public that the punishment and the person being punished are 100% the person who did this crime, whether that be solely or actually. Because look, we have historically seen people plead guilty for a multitude of reasons. They do. And I'm not saying that that's what Brian Kohberger's done, as later on in video 3, we're going to find out that he actually had the nickname The Ghost. That's it. Another report that I paid for, so you don't have to, so we can have a look at it. But anyway, that's for later. So yeah, look, consistently we've seen information come out, this evidence, but even the guilters had turned around and said,
well, look, there's going to be much more that comes out. Much more. There's loads more. You think you've seen everything. You're stupid. You're stupid, I'm telling you. You wait.
But then we waited. We waited, and then we got to the plea deal hearing. And what did we do? We heard Bad Santa recite a document that he himself had deemed irrelevant, which is bizarre. So look, in my opinion, a lack of solid concrete evidence to prove someone beyond a reasonable doubt. And I believe that, as aforementioned, in a world where you are taking someone's freedom away, whether that be through the method of execution or just incarceration for the rest of their life, known as the toe tag, whatever it's called, toe tag sentence, where that means they'll basically not get out until they've got a toe tag on. Yeah, I think it should be proven. I think it should be proven, whether that be through forceful admission, whereby the person who says, I did it, they should be forced to prove it and prove it publicly. So that the information should be shown to the public, where that person stands and says, yes, I did it, this is why I did it, and this is where you will find my clothes that I wore while I did it, and that's where I put the weapon. Things that only that individual should know. And I believe that there are certain family members around this, families of the victims who would likely agree. But I think that should be forced. That is as simple as that. And if they won't do that, then I think that the plea deal should be rejected, and it should then just go to fucking trial and let a jury of their peers decide their fate. They may then be scared that this could then result in the aforementioned execution, and perhaps that will prompt them to share information that undeniably allows the public to understand that this is the person who did this crime, and therefore the punishment fits them. But look, as part of that, we heard Cy come forward. Cy, who currently has gone off-grid, but I believe that he is still going to be hindered by the non-dissemination order. Ultimately, the whole case, the trial situation, the discovery, all of that, the non-dissemination order, that still sits in place, regardless of what's been said by Brian Kohberger up to this point, up to the point where this is concluded, and that is by a sentencing hearing. Then there is nothing I feel that will change. So the non-dissemination order will sit in place. We've got a hearing tomorrow. I'm going to stream it live, so join me then. But, Cy come forward and he shared some information about things that were missing. Now, later on, it would be deemed by a certain judge that he was nothing more than a conspiracy theorist. And I would argue that that statement goes beyond the realms of what he should be allowed to do. I don't believe that that's right. I don't believe that that's proper. If there was things that he felt towards what Cy had raised, then he should have acted accordingly and gone down a more professional route. But instead, he publicly called him a conspiracy theorist. But look, we know that the house was torn down. 1122 King Road was ripped down, taken away, buried. And now Docket Decoder has come forward with a theory. And I think that it's a valid theory when you listen closely to the information that Cy is talking about. So we're going to listen to a short segment. Thank you to Docket Decoder for sharing this. If you haven't already subscribed to Docket Decoder, please go and do so. You can see their information on the screen here. That is their channel, Docket Decoder. I don't want to hear people in the comments telling me that they don't like this person or that person, or they don't like the AI, or I don't give a fuck. Okay? I don't care. This isn't a place where I want to hear whether you do or do not like someone. We want to look at information and find out whether it's relevant and knock our heads together as a community and have a discussion about it. So let's crack on. That being said,
how if drive testing was done to create that cast draft?
Yes, there's images in the latter part of the report up around slides 100 and above. I believe there's a total of 4 images that were populated to that report that would require drive testing.
When somebody's doing drive testing, do you expect data to be produced?
Absolutely. Creating a work product that uses drive testing and then coming into court and testifying without the drive testing is no different than creating an exhibit like this and then saying, well, we don't have to produce the AT&T records that created this.
Just as a side note, that's also like bringing someone a document that says, oh, this DNA belongs to Brian Kohberger, but not producing any work document to support it. That would be on similar lines as well. Do you know what I mean? But what he's talking about in terms of drive test, and that is where they get some information and say, look, this is the information, and they back it up with proof by actually doing a physical drive test to show that that is indeed accurate. There was some early criticisms about data being generated and how they would add credibility to that data. Some judges had earlier said that this was just junk science, this was not something that was credible, and that is pretty much when they introduced doing proper drive testing, going out and showing, look, this is credible because we're physically showing you how these systems react and and showing you the actual accuracy of them. So yeah, drive testing is incredibly important when you're trying to say that an individual drove their car around this area. But check this bit. Check this out.
The source data for drive testing is the drive test.
Do we have the drive testing that was done by the FBI to help create that report?
We have what I believe is the majority. There are some significant pieces missing. I can't say that those missing pieces exist and haven't been turned over, or they were erroneously not collected. I don't know which, but there are some pretty significant pieces that are missing.
I'm going to ask you some questions about that. But first, I want to know.
If you haven't seen this video done by Docket Decoder, and you don't know the answer to this question because you didn't hear this original hearing from Cyray, I want you to put down in the comments what areas you think are actually missing. What areas were missing in the drive test and in the data?
When you first saw drive testing data that was produced to us in Discovery, what did that cover?
I found a file in the Discovery, I want to say early December, that included drive test, but it was about a 3-minute sample that covered less than a quarter of a mile in a completely irrelevant location. So it added no value to my analysis at all.
What were you looking for? What time frame and location were you looking for based on the CAS draft report review?
I would expect significant drive testing around any location that coverage maps were being used in the CAS report. I would expect significant documentation on potential routes.
So what he's basically saying here is if you're going to show a map saying that you believe that a suspect traveled in this specific area, then he would expect drive testing and data that goes hand in hand with that. That's like saying, well, what they did, they said he was driving here and this is the route that he took, but they supplied a load of data relevant to drive testing and so on and so forth in an area that had no relevance to that. And then kind of tried to jam them all together to make it look like, oh, we've got drive testing data, we've got, you know, what their idea is, their maps and what have you. Do you know what I mean? It was a little bit of a, almost like a Kansas City shuffle. Have a look at that without fucking realizing that that has no real relevance to that. You know, I want to see the drive testing and data that is relevant to that area that you're claiming the person was.
That this device may have taken. I would expect significant documentation on the crime scene.
You just told us that you think we have most of it, but there's some significant parts that are missing.
Yeah, and I want to qualify that just so it's really clear, because I understand it's starting to get very technical. There's over 500,000 lines of data that was turned over. So I'll make it clear, there's a lot of data that has been produced. I would say, in my opinion, looking at what's been produced, probably 2 or 3% is missing.
And on a side note, so what does that look like when you've got that much data but only a fraction missing? But it is incredibly important. Probably out of all of what you've got, there is a very, very minuscule amount, but that is the absolute most important, and that isn't there. Does that sound like 52 plus terabytes of data where you were given a huge amount of information, massive amount of information, that just prior to Brian Kohberger taking a plea deal, his own counsel basically said, I haven't had enough time to go through this. I'm not going to be prepared for trial. And lo and behold, a few days later, Brian Kohberger takes a plea deal, or, you know, or offers a plea deal, or pleads out, throws a towel in, whatever. If you don't see alarm bells there, red flags, whether you think he's guilty or not, it should be the way it's all come about that should bother you, that should scare you. Because surely, even if you think he's guilty, you want to see him go through the process and be proven guilty properly. Surely.
It's not the amount of data or the time of the data, it's the locations of the data. Some of the most significant locations in this case, we're missing some data.
Those significant locations, have they been depicted or captured on the cast draft report?
They have.
And tell me what those locations are. What are we missing?
I am unable to find any measurements along, I believe it's 270, the Moscow-Pullman Road. If you drove the most direct route from Pullman to Moscow or vice versa, pretty much as soon as you're leaving Pullman to the time that you arrive in Moscow, we are missing that entire stretch. And if there's ever been a case that we need to look at, what does it look like when a phone travels from Pullman to Moscow? This is probably the case. We have the neighborhood around the crime scene, but we don't have the crime scene. Normally, that wouldn't be too terribly significant because if it's a flat area, there's not a lot of vegetation or mountains. You could probably interpret the same. The location of this crime scene is very unique because it sits on a mountain. Part of it is shielded by a mountain. There's a lot of other big, thick, dense apartment buildings there. Your phone is going to behave differently inside of that residence than it might on the road behind the residence or in front of the residence. I can't find any drive test data that actually encapsulates any part of the property.
Boom. There you go. So, what do you think to that then? And now the house has been erased, gone, knocked down, goner. Like a fart in the wind, buried. So the question here, and what Docket Decoder raised, is did this house get buried to hide information, to hide data, to mean that you cannot extract information from it? Once it's gone, it's gone. Why would you knock the fucking thing down just to then build a model of it? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. How much time, effort, money, because they've got to go in there, they've got to do testing and measurements, they've got to use proper, sensors and equipment. They're going to have to go out there, they're going to have to build it, take time. Why would you do that? And then it's not going to be to scale, but it can be manipulated, and it also cannot be drive tested because it's a model, a Wendy house, a doll's house, a Dolly's house. Why just not leave the fucking house up? Why knock the house down? I think this is a valid question. And based on what Cyray said, it does lead you to believe that there is a potential that this house was knocked down to avoid being able to extract any information from it. My question is, at this stage, and I raise even bigger eyebrows, big bushy eyebrows now, and Taylor agreed to it as well, and now we see Brian Kohberger plead out. Let me know down below what you think, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Mwah.